Welcome to the Hoja on Architecture podcast. Teaching the Designer, Chapter 2, The Workshop as a Classroom. In the previous chapter, we explored how design education existed long before schools, universities, and formal qualifications. We argued that the origins of teaching lie not in institutions, but in the intentional transmission of knowledge itself. Human beings learned through observation, imitation, repetition, and participation, gradually transforming individual experience into collective knowledge. Yet as societies became more complex, these informal forms of learning increasingly required structure. Knowledge is needed not only to be shared but also to be preserved, refined, and passed forward with greater consistency. One of the most important environments in which this transformation occurred was the workshop. When people think about education, they often imagine classrooms. Desks, lectures, textbooks, examinations, and formal curricula have become so closely associated with learning that it is easy to assume they are universal features of education. Yet for much of human history, learning occurred elsewhere. It took place in fields, homes, marketplaces, construction sites, ships, temples, and workshops. Knowledge was embedded within everyday activity rather than separated from it. For design-related knowledge, the workshop became particularly significant. Long before design schools existed, workshops functioned as environments where skills, techniques, values, and professional identities could be transmitted across generations. They were places of production, but also places of learning. The workshop was not simply a location where objects were made, it was a social structure through which expertise was cultivated. Within these environments, learning occurred through participation rather than abstraction. Novices entered the workshop not as students in the modern sense, but as apprentices. They learned by observing experienced practitioners, assisting with tasks, repeating procedures, and gradually assuming greater responsibility. Knowledge was rarely delivered through lectures, instead, it emerged through practice. This distinction is important because it reveals a fundamentally different understanding of education. Contemporary education often separates learning from doing. Students spend years studying concepts before applying them professionally. In many historical workshops, however, learning and production were inseparable. The apprentice learned precisely because they participated in real work. Education occurred through engagement rather than preparation alone. The apprenticeship model also recognized that expertise develops gradually. Complex skills cannot simply be transferred through explanation. They require repetition, correction, feedback, and experience accumulated over time. A craftsperson could describe how to carve timber, shape stone, weave fabric, or construct a structure, but genuine mastery emerged only through sustained practice. The workshop therefore provided something that formal instruction alone could not: direct exposure to the realities of making. At the same time, workshops transmitted more than technical knowledge. They also communicated professional values, cultural traditions, ethical expectations, and social norms. Apprentices learned not only how to perform tasks, but how to behave within a community of practice. They absorbed standards of quality, attitudes toward materials, approaches to problem solving, and relationships with clients, collaborators, and society. In this sense, the workshop functioned as both an educational and cultural institution. It preserved accumulated knowledge while simultaneously shaping future practitioners. Every generation inherited techniques developed by those who came before and contributed new adaptations of their own. Learning, therefore, became part of a continuous cycle linking past, present, and future. This process helps explain why craft traditions often display remarkable continuity across centuries. Knowledge survived not because it was always written down, but because it was embodied within communities. Techniques were preserved through practice. Expertise existed not only in books or documents, but in hands, movements, habits, and routines. Much of what was learned in workshops was tacit knowledge, forms of understanding that are difficult to fully describe in words alone. Tacit knowledge remains important even today. Many aspects of design involve judgment, intuition, material sensitivity, and experiential understanding that cannot be reduced entirely to rules or instructions. Designers frequently develop insights through making, testing, failing, adjusting, and trying again. The workshop recognized this reality long before educational theory developed formal language to describe it. Workshops also reveal an important relationship between learning and collaboration. Although apprentices learned from masters, knowledge did not move in only one direction. Workshops were collective environments where practitioners observed one another, exchanged techniques, solved problems together, and contributed to shared projects. Learning emerged through interaction as much as instruction. This collaborative dimension challenges modern assumptions about expertise. Educational histories sometimes focus on exceptional individuals, presenting knowledge as the product of isolated genius. Yet workshops remind us that expertise often develops within communities. Innovation frequently emerges from collective experimentation rather than individual inspiration alone. The workshop therefore represents not only a model of learning but also a model of knowledge creation. As workshops expanded, some became highly organized institutions. Guild systems emerged across many societies, regulating training, standards, and professional practice. Apprenticeship increasingly followed recognized stages, often progressing from apprentice to journeyman and eventually to master. These structures introduced greater consistency into the transmission of knowledge while helping maintain professional standards. Yet despite increasing organization, workshops remained fundamentally different from schools. Learning was still rooted in production. Knowledge remained connected to materials, tools, and real-world challenges. Education was inseparable from practice. This connection would leave a lasting influence on design education, many of whose elements remain visible today. Modern design studios, project-based learning, critiques, reviews, and practical workshops all reflect aspects of this historical inheritance. Although contemporary educational institutions operate very differently from medieval workshops, they continue to recognize that design knowledge develops through active engagement rather than passive observation alone. The idea that students learn by doing remains one of the most enduring principles of design education. Understanding the workshop as a classroom therefore changes how we understand educational history. The origins of design education cannot be located solely within universities or academies. They also exist within communities of practice that developed sophisticated systems of learning long before formal educational institutions emerged. The workshop demonstrates that teaching is not defined by a classroom. It is defined by the intentional cultivation of knowledge, skills, and judgment. Seen from this perspective, the workshop represents one of humanity's most influential educational inventions. It provided a framework through which expertise could survive beyond individual lifetimes. It transformed learning from an informal activity into a structured social process. Most importantly, it established principles that continue to shape design education today. In the next chapter, we will examine another transformation that profoundly changed how designers learn. We will explore the emergence of drawing as a tool of communication, representation, and thinking. The discussion will shift from making to imagining, from physical production to visual representation, and from learning through direct construction to learning through drawings. Because once ideas could be represented before they were built, design education itself began to change. This concludes Chapter 2 of Teaching the Designer, the workshop as a classroom. Thanks for listening. See you in the next episode.